the reason I stress on responsible use of technology is because, we've seen the past several years now, and especially since the advent of AI and machine learning, where data is used to derive insights and to target specific clients or specific issues. The use of that type of technology has not been very responsible. And I don't know, everyone has given this example numerous times, but again, we come back to Facebook, and I think the reason we come back to Facebook is because it was actually the US elections which highlighted and magnified this irresponsible use of technology a lot, and everyone caught on to that. But since there's been several cases, almost every day you hear of the improper use of technology for recruitment. You hear about the improper use of technology for taking decisions in courts, for sentencing people. So that's why I have advocated and articulated this at several forums, and I'm not the only one who does that. You have to be responsible not only in the use of technology, by the way. You have to be responsible in everything that you do, the way you manage risk, the way you provide credit if you're in banking, the way you serve your clients, serve your customers. There's responsibility in all this. You're exposing yourself to your clients, and all the more you need to be very responsible, because technology is actually a very, very powerful tool. And if it's in the wrong hands, it can be misused, as we've seen it being misused. The best example, which everyone can relate to, is what happens when accounts are hacked. For example, the bank accounts are hacked, or the databases of staff within an institution, of the client base of an institution. I think several people over the years have been affected by that. And that's why I mean that. And what I mean by responsible innovation also ties into this, because at times, you may be using the technology, and we've got a lot of institutions telling us that, because they leveraged an existing technology. So they had a vendor provide them with a technology which enables that institution to make data-driven decisions and derive insights. Without questioning, that institution did not question how that innovation operates. And the innovator actually also did not look at the algorithms, if you may, to see if the algorithms were biased when they provided these insights. And a lot of instances we've seen that algorithms are biased. And they may not be biased because the innovator wanted them to be biased. They could be biased, and usually are biased, because of the fact that the makers of those algorithms, or those who wrote the algorithms, have biases in them inherently. All of us have biases. We know that for a fact. It could be against gender, it could be a bias against countries, or against people, against nationalities. This is a fact of life. And depending on who has made that algorithm, it can creep into it, and therefore the decision based on an algorithm which is biased will also be biased and irresponsible. So that's actually what I mean by it. And actually, to your question on fintech, so you perhaps read my last article, I think you referred to it earlier as well, where I said that we have all been catapulted into the digital era. Not that we've not been trying to accelerate the pace of digitization. I have, a lot of my colleagues have, a lot of people have over the last 5, 6, 7 years, trying to accelerate the pace at which institutions, and I just stick to banking and financial institutions because that's where most of my expertise is. So trying to get these institutions, these banks, to leverage technology, and so that they not only stay relevant, but are able to better deliver their services and products. and that is what the market demands. The market, the nature of the market, the demands of the market, we all know change with time. They change with traditions. They change with the surroundings. And today, we like to say the young people, the millennials, the Generation Z, are individuals who want to bank. They want to do everything differently, but again, we're sticking to banking and finance. They want to bank the way they manage their finances on call. They want to do it immediately. They want to do it conveniently. They don't want to walk into a bank branch. They don't want to take days to open an account or to deploy funds in case they're using, they want to invest in the stock market, for example, or wherever. So these are issues which are today possible to resolve and to offer by leveraging technology. And the only reasons many banks, majority of the banks even today, have not been able to do that is not, today I like to say it's not because they don't want to. I mean, it was because they didn't want to a few years ago. But I am optimistic and I say they want to. But they are not able to because of a lot of legacy issues which have to do with their human resources, with their mindsets, with their existing technology infrastructure. So they're not able to do that, but they need to. And that's where these fintechs came in. Again, fintech 1, old story, fintech 2, new story, ongoing story, where initially it was thought, and I'll repeat it again, although everyone now knows this story, that these financial technology companies would be offering banking and financial services in a manner that banks will become irrelevant. But obviously down the road, it was also realized that these fintechs are actually startups and they're very small, and in order for them to scale, they need clients, they need access to data, and therefore we came to Fintech 2, which was that they need to leverage existing institutions which had the client base and which had the data, which were the banks. So then we spoke about partnerships, and today that's where we are. So these banks, which have been wanting to leverage technology, but not able to leverage technology, today can do that because they do not need to spend time or resources in innovating or developing platforms or the ability to onboard customers or the ability to reach out to more clients or the ability to assess credit risk, especially of small and medium enterprises. They can readily go to a fintech which offers these services and partner with them or acquire them or have some sort of arrangement with them whereby the technology is provided by the fintech and the clientele and other infrastructure is provided by the bank. And today, as you know, we have open banking, which is banking as a service. So the banks have opened up their data to these fintechs so that they can plug into the bank's database and start offering these services, leveraging the banking license or the infrastructure of the bank. So that's what's happening right now. So this is the way financial technology has evolved over the years, over the past 5, 6, 7 years. And this is the way banks are trying to close this gap between their inability to acquire or leverage technology to being able to do that. Now, even I may have sounded it or may have made it sound simple, but it is not that simple because, again, because of legacy, there are also issues on the bank side. Okay, so they need to leverage a fintech. So which one of these several fintechs that are on offer today do they need to leverage? And what is the criteria for them to assess which one of them they need to partner with? And what form should this partnership take? Should they go ahead and acquire this fintech? Should they have some arrangement with them where they share in the revenue stream? Should there be a commission? Should there be a subscription model? So all these are issues which banks are struggling to understand and resolve. And this is where banks need assistance. And in the way of all this also stands the fact that within the org structure of these legacy financial institutions, there are individuals who may not want this to happen. And they may not want it to happen because of several reasons. Maybe it's because of the fear of technology itself, because they've not been exposed to it too much, or it's a fear of them being replaced by technology, because what they've been doing over the past several years could be automated and given in the hands of technology. So there's a lot of resistance in that. So the understanding and this fear. So that needs to be overcome. So there's a whole area of change management within these financial institutions which need to happen before they're even able to go out and leverage technology to be able to offer better products and services. And in order for this change to also happen, you need another layer of management buy-in, which is commitment. So, and I've seen that. I mean, I've worked with numerous banks globally, and a major issue, actually this technology part is not a major issue at all, especially in 2020. It may have been 5 years ago where you needed to sort of alter or amend or change the core banking infrastructure to be able to put on top of that a layer for KYC or for digitization of the processes or whatever. Today you don't really need to do that. So technology is the easy part. The difficult part is actually this commitment, and then once you have that commitment, making sure that the entire the entire organization is not only committed, but they understand why this is happening. So that is actually the struggle that is happening right now. And I think a lot, so coming back to, so we've all been accelerated into or catapulted into the digital era because of what's happened in COVID-19, because of the fact that we were confined to the four walls of our homes and just had technology at our disposal to be able to bank, to be able to shop, to be able to communicate, to be able to do our jobs. So that has created even more awareness amongst clients, if you may, of financial institutions that, wow, this is a better way to bank. I don't even have to leave my home. So the onus and the pressure on banks is even more today than it was 4 or 5 months ago to speed up this technology. And there are banks who have now started, from what I understand, that even in this cost-cutting environment, so most of the costs that are being cut are not in the realm of digitization or technology, but in other areas, because this is an area where financial institutions, banks want to now focus and beef up so that they are able to meet the the expectations, if you may, of the clients. And we've seen banks espouse the fact that they have digitized and they are client-centric, and but when you dig deeper, I mean, it's probably in many cases limited to customer experience, to the app, to the fact that they can use their app to log in and do some basic transactions. But if you go behind and look at the processes, the onboarding, for example, or the way that credit risk is assessed to speed up the disbursement of credit, especially to small and medium enterprises, they're still lagging. And I can tell you that this front-end customer experience will come to naught, will fade away if it's not backed up by robust digitized processes. So you may have a very good upfront experience in talking to your bank and connecting to your bank, but when it comes to your being onboarded as a new client, the experience may not be that good. And when it comes to a credit being processed, which you have requested because you needed money yesterday to be able to ensure that your supply chain is not disrupted, and you're not able to get it in less than the 5 days that it usually took a bank because they've not digitized their back-end processes, the experience is going to be good either. So if you talk about enhancing customer experience, you need to also, banks, financial institutions also need to look at the way they have been able to leverage technology to digitize the back-end processes, also to support this excellent customer experience that they're espousing. So let me just stop here.